All right. So it's 3:30. So I'll just go ahead and get started. I don't actually have slides. I just like to talk about it, so I'm not gonna do any screen share or anything like that. But I'll just give you an overview of the neuropsychology specialization within the context of the program. So my name is Dr. Justin Carr. I am the neuropsychology concentration coordinator. And we may have a neuropsychology student here. I do not. Oh, there we have Sharon Chen, who's currently in the neuropsychology concentration. She works with me. So I'll give her a chance to say something after I give a little bit of an overview. And then Christina Pinheiro may join as well. I gave her a last minute notification about this, but she's at a practicum at the VA in neuropsychology. So she might be available. She said she may join a little late, but she also might not be available because she's on a clinical practicum completing her training. So to give you an overview, neuropsychology is a specialization within the context of clinical psychology as a whole. There are actually multiple specializations. Neuropsychology is kind of one of the ones that's the most structured in the expectation of training, and it is structured in the sense that we want everyone to be prepared for board certification in the context of clinical neuropsychology. If you want to be a clinical neuropsychologist nowadays, if you look at any of the jobs that are posted on any of the neuropsychology societies, they tend to ask their applicants to be board eligible or board certified. And what does that require? So that specifically requires a 2-year postdoc in clinical neuropsychology. So that's, let's say you get into the program, you complete the whole program, you complete an internship, and then you have to do this 2-year postdoctoral training in clinical neuropsychology. That is the standard by which to get board eligible. But to get there along the way, there's actually established standards under what's called the Houston Conference Guidelines. Those guidelines are currently being revisited and reviewed, and they sent out a draft last year called the Minnesota Conference Guidelines. But those are not currently established. Those are still in progress. So we are structured under the Houston Conference Guidelines, and there's a taxonomy for defining the amount of training that you're going to receive in the context of clinical neuropsychology during the doctoral program. There's other standards for your internship and your postdoc, but we are your doctoral program, so our emphasis is on training in the context of your doctoral program. And the highest degree of training that you can receive in the context of the doctoral program is a major area of study. And what is required for a major area of study? Well, that's what we require. And we don't require anything more, and we don't require anything less. And that's because you have a number of demands on your time in the context of clinical training. You're not just training to be a clinical neuropsychologist, you're also training to be a clinical psychologist, you're also training to be a researcher, you're also managing your complicated and busy lives that we all sometimes have. So to be a major area of study requires 3 courses in clinical neuropsychology, broadly defined. It requires 2 practica in clinical neuropsychology. It requires other experiences in clinical neuropsychology, and it requires that your dissertation work be focused in the context of clinical neuropsychology. So the courses, we offer 2 courses internal within our program. And those would be a clinical neuropsychology assessment course and an advanced clinical neuropsychology course that I would say is kind of like a neurological conditions course. I'm actually relatively new here. It's hard to say that because it was 2020 when I started, but I taught one of those courses, and I will teach the second course in the coming year. But the first course is focused on like neuroassessment methodologies. So what are the constructs that we're trying to measure? How do we measure those constructs? And then the neurological conditions is to focus on, or the second advanced neuropsychology course is to focus on the neurological conditions. Like what are the conditions that we typically evaluate? And neuropsychologist works with all sorts of conditions, ranging anything from dementia and Alzheimer's disease and traumatic brain injury. Those are the most common. But neuropsychologists also are involved in pre-surgical evaluations for organ transplant. Or pre-surgical evaluations for deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease. Can this person, do they have the cognitive capacity to recover following a surgery? So there's a number of different conditions that a neuropsychologist might work with, and that's kind of the focus of covering that in that second course. The third course is some sort of an elective. I've been actually perusing the catalog of graduate courses available at UK. Traditionally, it has been a neuroanatomy course that's been offered externally. It's actually through the physical therapy department here that focuses on neuroanatomy, and I've heard it's a very good course. But there are a couple of other courses, like we have a department of neuroscience, and we also have a cognitive neuroscience section within our psychology department, and they sometimes offer electives and like seminars in that area as well. So that third course is a little bit more flexible, but the emphasis is that we actually find courses or that will align with all of the competencies required to be a clinical neuropsychologist. So 3 courses. Our practica, we talked about our practica previously, but most commonly people aim to do that practicum at the Kentucky Neuroscience Institute, which is in the Department of Neurology. It's a really valuable and interesting training program. As noted, the training director of that program is a graduate of the program. So that gives us a nice close connection there. There's also a new neuropsychologist who's also a graduate of the University of Kentucky at the VA in Lexington, who's now supervising our students. And that's what Christina is at right now, which is a terrific training opportunity. There is the developmental pediatrics clinic that offers kind of I'll call it like a neuropsych light practicum, but it is oriented kind of what you typically see within the context of a pediatric neuropsychology experience. Folks have gone up to Louisville before, been at the Louisville VA, Norton Neuroscience. Those have been established in the past as well. And we're always looking for new training opportunities for students because the program is small now. There's just a handful of students who are in it because it is, mostly my lab, but Dr. Jordan Harp is considering students as well. And there are students in other labs who are interested in the neuropsychology concentration. So as it gets bigger, we're going to look for more training opportunities. So that's the coursework and the practicum. The other experiences, we are very affixed to a College of Medicine. So I would describe the other experiences. Any student can get access to attending the neurology grand rounds. So the Department of Neurology has weekly grand rounds. They used to be in person, but now they are online only because after COVID, they tried to transition them to hybrid and no one came. So they decided to make them online, which actually fit well with like the physicians' busy schedules. Some of them are by neuropsychologists and some of them are by neurologists. I attended the one this morning that was about ALS and how they diagnose ALS. One was about the role of neuropsychologists in epilepsy teams. So a lot of content there. We also have this Bluegrass Area Neuropsychology group that we've been revamping under the leadership of actually one of the students in the program, Eric, who kind of wanted to bring it back. And it has involved kind of like additional lectures in neuropsychology. And we're actually just on Friday, we're going to start trying to revamp it to be more of like an in-person, retro in-person concept of I'm going to bring everybody pizza on a Friday and someone's going to talk about a neuropsychology case in the context of the clinic. Because it's really cool. The K&I, the neuropsychologists who work over there, who are practitioners, they're a 10-minute walk to our building. So they'll come over to our building and meet us and chat with us. And I'm a licensed neuropsychologist too, but I don't engage in practice as much as they do. So it's a good environment to have multiple neuropsychologists kind of around. And then the research, that's up to you. Neuropsychology dissertations are probably broadly defined, I think, so long as it involves some degree of focus on either the sequelae of a neurological condition, the measurement or evaluation of cognitive functioning in any condition, or really any form of neurological functioning in the context of a psychiatric or neurological condition, I think would broadly be neuropsychology. And if you're interested in this, and you're like, actually, my lab doesn't do any of that, that's something that we could obviously talk about. But that's it. So those 3 courses are elective in addition to the program. The 2 neuropsychology practica would be could serve as like core requirements for practicum experiences in the program. Like the program, I think, requires 3 practica, and like that could be 2 of your 3. Some people do 4 practica in the context of neuropsychology. Sometimes it does take a little bit longer because it requires more coursework. It requires these specialty neuropsychology training opportunities that might take a little bit more time to be prepared for. And we do see historically students take maybe one more year to complete, but that's not a guarantee. Our goal is for you to complete the program as expeditiously as possible, while being competent and ready to succeed for an internship. And then obviously we'd want you to do a neuropsychology focused internship, which would prepare you well for a neuropsychology postdoc. Because at the end of the day, the goal is for you to be along that pipeline in terms of quality training in neuropsychology. And we're aligned with national guidelines to get you there. So I'll pause, and Sharon, if you had anything to add or any comments or thoughts, feel free to jump in. And Christina too, I see you here. So hi, Christina. I cannot hear you, Sharon.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So hi, my name is Sharon. I am a second year in Dr. Carr's lab. I do research primarily related to traumatic brain injury and intimate partner violence. I don't really have much else to say aside from the fact that we get some early on training and assessment work starting your first year. So that is fantastic. And we actually are able to start doing some like learning disability and ADHD assessments right off the bat, and we have to do those additionally throughout our training. So we'll have at least some assessment work that kind of corresponds to assessments that you might do as a neuropsychologist. I am more than welcome to like answer any of the questions that you might have, and I'll just give the mic to Christina really briefly to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, my name is Christina. I am currently at the VA. I'm doing a neuropsych practicum placement here. I'm a 3rd year clinical psychology graduate student in Dr. Justin Carr's lab, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the VA, but it is my first neuropsych practicum placement. So unfortunately, I can't answer the questions about K&I, but I'm sure Dr. Harp would be willing to answer those.
Thanks, Christina, and welcome Dr. Jordan Harp, who's our training director over at K&I. Sorry I didn't mention you earlier.
Oh, it's okay. I joined late, so I wouldn't have known. Christina, I recognize those file cabinets behind you, by the way. So hi, everybody. I am training director, as Dr. Carr said, over at the Kentucky Neuroscience Institute. And that institute, I should mention, it's the clinic. It's the outpatient ambulatory clinic for neurology and neurosurgery combined together. And it's also a research enterprise at this point. So they're essentially trying to mesh a lot of research studies with it to help with recruitment and so on. What we have over there currently is a postdoctoral fellowship. That was kind of the first training experience we've had. Right now we have 2 current postdocs. We're trying to recruit 2 more for next year. I don't know if we're always going to have 4, but we may. We also have in the past had a practicum, and it's been kind of offline for a short time, but now we're ready to have practicum students there as well. And that's really a nice experience. We usually wait until the 3rd year or so, sometimes a little bit farther in, to do that. Although we can make exceptions if you demonstrate an ability and competence. And I know that a lot of you have had already quite a bit of neuropsychology experience. But we see a wide range of general neurology referrals. And then we also have mini clinics. So for example, we have Dr. Ainger, who sees people with pre-surgically for transplants and epilepsy. I'm more of a memory disorders and Alzheimer's stroke person. We have Dr. Fred Schmidt, who you may have heard of, who's been here for 35 something years, also mostly a memory disorders guy, and a number of other things. We have movement disorders, pre-surgical DBS clinic as well. And we just try to rotate people through that. That practicum in particular, you expect to see 1 patient per week. And we take you through the patient, case conceptualization, writing and revising the report. And that's essentially it. Usually, I tell people to expect it to be about 15 hours a week, 12 to 15 hours a week to do that.
Thank you all. If anyone has any questions, Christina is at the VA working with a new neuropsychologist in town, Dr. Andy Williams, which is really great, a new experience that she's exposed to and does have neuropsych instruments behind her, which is terrific. And then Dr. Harp obviously is at KNI, which I will say is a very unique and high quality training experience available to students in our program. Like, to be at a department of neurology I think it would probably stand out on an application, because a lot of really, really good internship sites and postdocs are at these academic medical centers. And to say that you already worked with, you've interfaced with neurologists, and you've worked with an electronic health record and posted your neuropsych reports in a quick turnaround, are all like really strong skill sets to develop at the practicum level, and I think would make you really well qualified and prepared for a neuropsychology internship.
And I should mention on that note that there are also didactics that practicum students are involved in. And so it's kind of a combination lab meeting and didactics that involves postdocs, but also involves some affiliated faculty who are on mentored projects like K awards and things like that, where they needed to learn more about the field. And then the practicum students, as well as the lab student who I would be advising. So it's another arena, I think, to learn about some of the things that go on here at the AMC.
Does anyone have any questions?
Or if you have questions, you can also message them to me and I can read them out for you. But I think I saw a question.
Is my mic working? Can you hear me?
Is.
Sure. Yeah, I have a question. Do you have any information on like what are the success rate for students seeking a neuropsych focused internship?
So interestingly enough, I started in 2020. So Christina here is my first graduate student, along with Eric, who's not here, and Sharon is the third student. So I really hope they're successful. I think they will be, but we don't know just yet. And they will be. They will be successful. In terms of history, when I started here, there were two senior neuropsychology students who essentially had gone through a similar training opportunities and coursework. And both of them matched at really high quality internship sites. One was at UCLA in the Semel Institute, which is a really top-notch neuropsychology training opportunity. And the other matched at Rush in Chicago, which is a really top-notch training opportunity for neuropsychology in terms of national reputation. And then both of them went on to neuropsychology postdocs. So they both were able to obtain those opportunities as well. And I mean, Dr. Harp is a graduate of the program, so he's taken over everything at this point. But he could even tell you about folks before me who where they're at. I think one's at Mayo.
Yeah. One's permanent job is at Mayo, another is permanent at MedStar Rehabilitation in Baltimore, and that was actually her internship and postdoc site. And then we recently had, well, recently to me, Emory was one of the internship sites, and then St. Louis VA, I believe, was another fairly recent site. And a couple of the postdocs have come back, including me, to complete the fellowship here through KNI. And others have gone on to other places. Most people tend to stick around or come back. I think we've had, one person went from Emory to Mayo Jacksonville, and then her permanent position now is at Mayo Rochester.
Thank you.
Dr. Harp, I do have a question about the didactic lectures, and are those like opportunities for any of the neuropsychology concentration students, or are those only open to students that like are at your site for practicum?
So for practicum, I would say I would consider it required, but I think we're open to anybody coming in. It just depends on whether it fits in your schedule. We have some shared didactic and completely open didactic opportunities too. So another one that's required for practicum students and for postdocs, and actually for faculty over here, is neurology grand rounds on Tuesday mornings, and that's Zoom. It's never going to go back to in person. I don't think it's just too convenient, but it's a wide array, often from the point of view of a neurologist. But at times, now that we have 5 neuropsych faculty and 2 fellows, you'll get a good scattering of how the neuropsych world interfaces with that. It's really nice just for becoming fluent in the way these people think and the way they speak too. And then Dr. Carr, I don't know if you mentioned the Bluegrass area neuropsychology group, and that's intended for every trainee in the area, postdocs and graduate students, but it's mostly intended for the benefit of the graduate students. And quite a few faculty come as well. And it tends to be focused around case presentations, sometimes a special topic. We've even done it in the format of board review, which is similar to the K&I didactics. We kind of rotate through those things and involve a journal club component as well that I think would be non-required for people who just want to show up.
Well, if there aren't any more questions,
There was a question.
okay, there
I
is a
think I
question.
saw Alex.
Sorry. Just very quickly to be respectful of time, you quickly mentioned, Dr. Harp, that you lead a mostly stroke, Alzheimer's disease related practicum at the KNI, and I was wondering if the process to be involved in that is closely related to the process of general internship matching, or if it's a different process to be involved with that.
It's different. So it's exactly like all the other practicum experiences that you would have through the clinical psychology program. So it's a decision that we make together between the training director there, or director of clinical training there, and then me, and we just decide. And it's not really that the practicum is necessarily focused on Alzheimer's and stroke. We do try to get you kind of a wide array because we have such a diverse population, at least as far as conditions go.
Thank you.
But this is not Chicago, so it's not apply to a bunch of places and then do a competitive match for externships. This is more, we try to look ahead to who might want to rotate through and arrange it with people.
So when I talked about the practicum, I said it's a match process, but it's not like a internship match process. So you will say, I want to do K&I, and then we will reflect on who all wants to do K&I, who's ready to go there, and whether or not Dr. Harp and his colleagues feel like you're an appropriate fit for going there. And this is all transparent and honest. No one's going to be like, you can't go there and we're not going to tell you why. It'll be like, we think you might be ready for it, but here's the things that I think you still need to train on or demonstrate in order to be prepared for that. Like I said during the practicum, we want you to go to places where you have the opportunity to succeed. And K&I is a place in which things will move fast and learning is quick, and you do need to be ready to hit the ground running, probably. But also Dr. Harp is a very kind and nice, patient person. Far more nice and patient than I am, and I'm just wonderful. So there you go.
Thank you.
You mentioned the neuropsychology coursework that they take in order to meet that like board status that they're like ready to meet boards, when is that usually incorporated into grad school? Like what years do you see people taking that commonly?
So great question. I'll say one thing. The coursework is not required for boards. The coursework is like a major area of study. And it is for the concentration, the completion of the neuropsychology concentration here. I'm just going to say this frankly, actually in neuropsychology training, the only thing you need to do to be eligible for boards is a 2-year postdoc in neuropsychology. You actually don't need to go to a neuropsychology concentration program. But our goal is that you are prepared and competent and ready to be competitive for an internship and a postdoc. And you're going to be more competitive and more ready if you've done the coursework, if you've done the practicum. Those courses are offered not as often as I would like, but the way I'm developing them is like, if you're at the program and need to take it, you're going to take it now, because it is contingent. I'm the only neuropsychology faculty, so I'm the one who teaches them. So my availability, like when I'm available to teach a class, this is one of the ones that I'm going to teach. So as the program builds up, we have a sufficient number of people who need to take the class, which I think will be pretty common, that they would probably be offered one of them would be offered every year, or at the very least every other year. We're also mindful that if they are not offered, that it wouldn't necessarily be a barrier for you to access certain practicum training. We would figure that out. The elective courses, the neuroanatomy course through the physical therapy training program is offered every year. So if you want to take the neuroanatomy course, you can actually take that any year you want. But if you wanted an alternative elective, like a seminar in the cognitive neuroscience program, those are offered more variably. So to reflect back what I said, I teach 2 of the neuropsychology courses. Those 2 will be offered over the course of your span in the program, so that you can fulfill the concentration. Those do not need to be taken in sequence. So there will be times in which like a student will be like, I haven't taken anything and now I'm taking the advanced neuropsychology course. I'm going to be aware of that, and I'm going to adjust the approach to the course so that anybody can access it at any point. So that it's not a barrier to your training that you're like, I've been waiting three years for to even start and take a course here. Like Sharon took the course in her first year, which I bet was a little bit more difficult because you probably weren't exposed to like assessment. You're taking a neuropsychology assessment course at the same time. But I also was like, Sharon, I think you should take this now because, the next time it's offered might be in your 3rd year. So we want you to take it now. And I was aware of that. And I talked to Sharon about it. And I hope that you felt supported and able to achieve.
Yes, absolutely. And it helped that all the other students there were more advanced than me and had more assessment training than me. So it was like a good collaboration between Dr. Carr and the other students in class. And all of them just like really supported me in terms of like learning assessment and learning neuropsych assessment alongside that.
Thank you so much for answering that.
No problem. And does anyone have any other questions?
So just to clarify, the requirements are based around that Houston conference guidelines?
That is correct.
Spoke of earlier? Okay. But those aren't necessarily required for the licensure. Is that what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, so I'll clarify because it does get a little bit confusing in the context of neuropsychology. So what we offer here is the neuropsychology concentration. If you want to complete the neuropsychology concentration, that's going to be 3 courses. And that's going to be 2 neuropsychology practica and a neuropsychology dissertation, if you want to complete that here. And I'm just saying this, like not everyone here is going to come to this program. If you do go to a program that doesn't have a neuropsychology concentration, you can still be board certified in neuropsychology if you get a 2-year postdoc in neuropsychology. Like at this point in the field, they allow that to be eligible. But if you do the graduate training, you're more competitive for the internship and you're more competitive for the postdoc. Now, none of this actually has to do with your licensure as a clinical psychologist. That's actually the requirements of the APA accredited program. So in addition to all of this neuropsych concentration work, you're going to have to also do all of your training as a clinical psychologist. Now, all of that training, all of the courses that are required in general for every student going through this program, those opportunities, or not opportunities, those requirements are to ensure that at the end of this program, you are license eligible in any state in the United States based on it being an APA accredited program. Now, neuropsychology is a specialization within psychology. So anybody who wants to practice neuropsychology, you get licensed as a psychologist. Now, if you want to be board certified in the practice of neuropsychology, which is what you want to do if you want to get a job as a neuropsychologist, because a lot of places require this as a job, you need to, at the bare minimum, do that 2-year practicum, or sorry, 2-year postdoc. And we, through our program, are going to make you more competitive for that internship and that postdoc so that you align with national training standards in our field.
Absolutely. To follow up on that real quick, you mentioned the Minnesota conference guidelines. This might not even be relevant, but if those do get approved, would those affect people here getting in like this year, if potentially, assuming we get in this year, of course. But
if they come out, there's just going to be a shift in like training competencies. I don't actually think it's going to be a dramatic shift in the operational requirements of the program. I just think that they reflect on what is the content that we teach in those courses. And so it would not affect or change anyone's training as a neuropsychology student. It's just going to be a shift in what essentially nationally they'd say is the necessary competencies to be a neuropsychologist, which at that point in time, I read that, closely review that, and then review the syllabi for our courses and determine whether or not we're still fulfilling those expectations and requirements in terms of everyone being competent to practice neuropsychology.
Yeah, and they're guidelines, and when these things come out as guidelines, they usually take a few years for different sites to adopt them, and it happens at different rates. You know, what it would mean for me is I might adjust how a practicum looks or adjust some of the content areas that they recommend in the postdoc, but it doesn't affect people getting in anywhere.
Of course, yes. I was just curious about how it would affect our plan over the next 4 years, you know, if that changes anything. But no, that clarifies a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
I do just have another question about coursework. So like we have the 3 required courses in the neuropsychology concentration, but if students were wanting to take an additional course, would that be possible? Has that been done? And I'm just hoping you could speak a little on that.
They're welcome to take additional courses in our graduate training. It's just what that might be. You know, there are options that are like neuropsychology oriented or surround like the competency of them that you can find at the graduate level. And like, we don't really restrict students from taking additional courses. Like, for example, many students take like biostats courses. So if you found like another course that you felt was relevant for your learning, regardless of whether it was neuropsychology oriented, I think the program would be supportive of you taking that, so long as you're making progress in other elements of training, like so long as you're making progress in your thesis and your practica and all is going well. And it's like, I also want to take this and learn about it. That would be completely fine. I don't think anyone would bat an eyelash at it. And that third class of the 3, you know, is an elective. And if some student came and was like, I actually identified this third option that I think sounds really interesting and good, I would actually look to say, does this align with like competencies in neuropsychology? And I don't have it off the top of my head, but there's a list, you know, it's like clinical neurology and neuroanatomy and neuropsychological assessment and stuff like that. And if I felt, yeah, that's true, that does, then I'd say that could qualify as your third elective, you know, or your third class, which is an elective.
Aside from the biostats courses, which a lot of people, you know, in and outside of the neuropsych concentration will take, just elect to take, there usually is, and I don't know what the schedule is for it, there is usually a neurobiology of CNS disease, but it's actually CNS injury. So for example, way back in my grad school days, I was really interested in TBI. And so I took that, and it's again, a whole other world, whole other vocabulary, because you're talking a lot about genes and proteins and, you know, microbiological structures, but it was a really good one and it fit well with the concentration. And I imagine that any internship would only look well on you having taken something like that that was outside of the requirements.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, Michaela.
I was just gonna say thank you.
Yeah. And I think that might be one of the ones that's offered through the neuroscience PhD program here. And I corresponded with that director of their program about like the courses that are offered. One of the very interesting things about UK is it actually has the Sanders Brown Center on Aging. It actually has a gerontology PhD program. And it also has Scoburg, which is the Spinal Cord and Brain Injury Research Center. So you do have folks who are like PhD students who are like, you know, like Dr. Hart mentioned, was more neurobiology oriented, which is not for nothing very far from probably what you're going to do in your everyday practice as a neuropsychologist. But if you wanted to take those courses, you could. And I think it would be kind of interesting to interface, because I find it interesting to interface with those folks. Where like I go there and I talk to them about like symptom reporting of typical symptoms following a traumatic brain injury. And they're like, I cut up rat brains for a living. Like who cares about self-report data? And I'm like, well, everybody who works in clinical practice and psychology cares about self-report data, and pretty much anyone who works in clinical work in general. So they, you know, it's like night and day in terms of like the experiences of two disciplines that are trying to understand the brain and clinical conditions. Which can be very interesting and telling in terms of like your role on a research team and your role on in a clinical team when you know, people who are broadly within the same field of neuroscience just have extremely different perspectives on science and understanding than we all do or will. And I think that there might be something cool about taking classes alongside those students.
Yeah, thank you again just for answering that.
No problem. Any other questions? So feel free to email me if you do have any questions. I'm just gonna drop my email in the chat, but I'm easy to find on the internet. I look just like this in my picture. Probably wearing the same shirt. And I'll answer any questions that you have about the neuropsychology training. Also, this was supposed to be an hour focused on like specialization in the health psychology specialization as well. Alex has distributed slides. I'll actually let her chat about it. Or sorry that there was a scheduling conflict that led that to not happen, but Alex will just talk to you about the information that's available there.
Yeah, so like you said, since we weren't able to focus on the health specialization, after this meeting, I will email all of you the slides that were going to be presented, as well as a couple of students who have volunteered to answer questions via email about the health psychology concentration. So I will send that right after the meeting, and then if you have questions for them, feel free to reach out to them, or I'm happy to try and connect you to other people who might be able to answer your question. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you, Alex, and feel free to reach out. Christina and Sharon, if you could just drop your emails in the chat if you're comfortable, if students have any questions for you all. But yeah, that's that. I bet everyone's kind of tired, but you're just going to stay tired if you're going to talk to more people this week. But I'm sorry about that. Take a break, enjoy your evening. Or afternoon if you're on the West Coast, and I'll see some of you in the coming days. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.